Sam lived a quiet life with his wife Anna in a small neighborhood on the edge of town. Their house was not fancy, but it was warm and full of love. Every evening, Sam would sit with Anna on the porch, watching the sun slowly sink behind the row of tall trees. They enjoyed the peace that came with living away from the noise of the city. For years, nothing unusual had happened there. The neighbors knew each other by name, and people often waved when passing by. Life was simple, and Sam wanted it to stay that way. One evening, just as Sam was closing the gate after watering the garden, he noticed a black van pull up at the end of the street. It was not a vehicle he recognized. 3 men stepped out, all dressed in jackets with shiny badges pinned to their chests. They looked official, though something about their expressions felt sharp and unfriendly. Sam thought perhaps they were city workers or inspectors, but the sight of them unsettled him. A few minutes later, there was a firm knock on the front door. Anna, who was in the kitchen preparing dinner, wiped her hands and walked to answer it. When she opened the door, the men introduced themselves in quick voices. They claimed to be officers from the local homeowners association. Their words were strict, and their tone carried no warmth. They spoke as if they had power over the neighborhood. Anna was surprised. She had lived in the community for years and had never once heard about an active homeowners association. Still, she listened politely as they explained that she and Sam had been breaking several neighborhood rules. One man pulled out a clipboard filled with papers, pointing to lines of supposed violations. He claimed the grass was too long, the paint on the fence was peeling, and even the porch furniture was not approved. Anna frowned. She knew the lawn was trimmed, the fence had been painted just last summer, and the chairs on the porch were the same ones they had always used. None of the accusations made sense. When she tried to explain, the tallest man raised his voice and said she would need to pay heavy fines. Anna felt her stomach twist with unease. She called for Sam, who came to the door and stood beside her. Sam asked the men for identification. He wanted to see real proof that they were part of an official organization. Instead of answering, the men grew more insistent. They demanded payment immediately, saying that if he refused, serious consequences would follow. Something inside Sam told him this was not right. His voice stayed calm, but he firmly said he and Anna would not give money until they received proper documents. The men shifted uncomfortably, glancing at each other. Their authority seemed less convincing now, and Sam noticed small details that gave them away. Their badges were poorly made, and the papers on the clipboard were filled with vague notes, not official forms. Anna, though uneasy, stood close to her husband. She told the men she wanted them to leave. Her voice was steady, though her heart was racing. She began to close the door, not wanting to listen any longer. But one of the men quickly stepped forward and pushed against the door before it shut. The sudden force startled Anna, and she stumbled backward. Her hand slipped against the frame, and she lost her balance. She fell hard onto the floor of the entryway. Pain rushed through her arm as she tried to catch herself. Sam rushed to help her, calling her name in worry. The men, seeing the accident, backed away quickly. Their faces showed no concern, only nervousness. Without saying another word, they turned and hurried back to their van. The vehicle roared away down the street, leaving Sam and Anna shaken. Anna held her arm close, her face pale. Sam could see something was wrong. He carefully helped her up and placed her on the couch. Her arm was swelling quickly, and the pain did not ease. He knew he had to take her to the hospital at once. On the drive there, Anna tried to stay strong. She told Sam not to worry, but her voice trembled. Sam's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Anger and fear mixed in his chest, but he focused on getting her help. At the hospital, a nurse examined Anna and gently told them her arm was broken. She would need a cast and weeks of rest. Sam felt heavy inside. He hated seeing Anna in pain, and the thought of strangers causing this filled him with unease. When the nurse stepped away, Sam leaned close and asked Anna if she had ever heard of a homeowners association in their area. She shook her head. That was when the nurse returned, lowering her voice to share something important. She said there was no official homeowners association in that neighborhood at all. Sam and Anna exchanged looks of shock. The truth hit them both at once. Those men had not been officers. They had been imposters. They had come with fake badges and false claims, hoping to scare or trick people into giving them money. Anna felt a chill at the thought of strangers walking their streets with such boldness. Sam's mind began to race. He knew this was not something they could ignore. The imposters might come back, or they might move on to trick another family. Either way, he would not sit quietly and allow it. That night, after returning home with Anna safely settled, Sam walked out onto the porch. The stars were bright overhead, but his thoughts were heavy. He remembered his cousin Mark, the one person he trusted to stand by him in times of trouble. Mark was not an ordinary man. He and his biker cousins lived by their own code, one built on loyalty and family. Sam pulled out his phone and stared at it for a long moment. He knew calling Mark would set things into motion. Life might no longer be as quiet as before. Still, when he thought of Anna's broken arm and the fear in her eyes, he knew he had no choice. With steady hands, he dialed Mark's number. As the phone rang, Sam felt a new strength rise inside him. He did not know what would come next, but he knew one thing with certainty. Family would not let him stand alone. Sam sat by Anna's side through the night. Her arm was wrapped in a white cast, and though the pain medicine helped, she still shifted uncomfortably on the couch. The quiet of the house felt heavy. The hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the clock seemed louder than usual. Sam's thoughts would not rest. He replayed the moment over and over: the knock on the door, the harsh voices, Anna's fall, and the van speeding away. Each detail made him more certain that the imposters would try their trick again, maybe on another neighbor who was less cautious. When the first light of morning came through the curtains, Sam was already awake. He stepped outside with a cup of coffee in his hand, hoping the cool air would clear his mind. Birds sang from the trees, and children's bicycles lay scattered on the sidewalks. It was the same peaceful street he had known for years, yet it felt different now. Knowing strangers had walked here with lies made it feel unsafe. Sam's neighbor, Tom, walked over carrying a newspaper. He asked about Anna and offered kind words. But when Sam explained what had happened, Tom looked surprised. He said no one had ever spoken of a homeowners association in the area. He had never received rules, letters, or visits from any such group. Tom shook his head and said it sounded like a scam. His words confirmed what the nurse had already told Sam, but hearing it again made Sam feel more certain. Inside, Anna listened as Sam retold the story to her. She rested her good hand on his and whispered that she did not want anyone else to suffer the same way. She told him he needed to share this with someone who could help. Sam thought of calling the police, but part of him worried that without proof, it might lead nowhere. Those men had fake badges, a van with no clear markings, and a story designed to confuse. By the time any report was filed, they could be far away. That was when Sam's mind turned to his cousin Mark. Memories of their younger days came rushing back. Mark had always been the bold one. While Sam worked quietly in an office and lived a simple life, Mark had chosen a different path. He rode with a group of cousins who called themselves brothers more than friends. They traveled together on long stretches of road, always moving as one. Sam remembered family gatherings where Mark spoke of loyalty and standing up for each other. Mark's words were strong, and though some neighbors whispered about the biker lifestyle, Sam knew his cousin's heart. Mark believed in protecting family above all. Sam pulled out his phone. His thumb hovered over the call button. He wondered if reaching out would be too much. Would Mark think he was asking for trouble? But then he looked at Anna's arm and the sadness in her eyes. That was enough to make his decision. When Mark answered, his voice was deep and steady. Sam told him everything: the men at the door, the lies, Anna's fall, the nurse's words, and the van that had disappeared into the night. Mark listened without interruption. Sam could almost picture his cousin's face on the other end, serious and thoughtful, taking in every detail. After a long pause, Mark spoke. His voice carried a calm strength that Sam had always admired. He said family never stood alone and that he and the cousins would come. There was no need for Sam to ask twice. The promise was simple and clear. Anna, listening from the couch, asked if Mark would truly come. Sam nodded. She gave a small smile despite her pain. She knew Mark was not a man to break promises. Later that afternoon, Sam stepped outside again and noticed something unusual. Several neighbors were gathered at the end of the street, whispering and pointing. Curious, he walked over. They told him that the same black van had been seen driving past more than once that day. The imposters were circling, perhaps waiting for another chance. The neighbors looked worried. An elderly woman said she had even been approached by men offering to inspect her property, but she quickly sent them away. Sam's chest tightened. The imposters were bold enough to return so soon. This was no small trick, it was a plan to take advantage of the entire neighborhood. He assured the neighbors he was handling it, though inside he felt the weight of responsibility. He knew now more than ever that Mark's arrival could not come soon enough. That night, Sam and Anna sat together in the living room. The glow of the lamp filled the room with soft light. Anna leaned against him carefully, resting her cast arm on a pillow. She told him she trusted him, and she trusted Mark too. She said sometimes trouble came when it was least expected, but family was the shield that could carry them through. Her words gave Sam comfort. As the hours passed, Sam received a message on his phone. It was from Mark. It said simply that they were on their way. No details, no questions, just a promise. Sam read the words aloud to Anna, and for the first time since the incident, a sense of relief washed over them both. The following day, the distant sound of engines rolled into town. One by one, motorcycles appeared at the edge of the street, their chrome gleaming under the sun. The cousins had arrived. Neighbors peeked from windows and whispered among themselves, but Sam felt nothing but gratitude. He stepped out to greet them, his heart beating fast. Mark was at the front, his presence calm yet commanding. He climbed off his bike and pulled Sam into a strong embrace. No words were needed at first. The family bond was clear. Then Mark turned to Anna, speaking gently, asking how she was feeling. She smiled faintly, thankful for his concern. Sam explained again everything he had seen, every detail of the imposters, their van, their lies. Mark listened closely, his eyes steady. When Sam finished, Mark placed a hand on his shoulder and said they would take care of it. He promised the neighborhood would not have to live in fear. That evening, as the cousins settled in, Sam felt a weight lift from his chest. For the first time since Anna's fall, he believed things would change. The imposters had brought fear, but they had also awakened something stronger, a bond of family and the courage to stand together. Sam looked at Anna as she rested, and he whispered quietly to himself. Whatever came next, they were not alone. When the cousins arrived, the quiet neighborhood suddenly felt different. The sound of their motorcycles carried across the streets like rolling thunder. One by one, they parked in a neat line in front of Sam's house. The neighbors peeked from curtains and doorways, whispering about the sudden arrival of so many riders. Some felt nervous, but Sam knew better. He knew each of them carried a loyalty that could not be shaken. Mark stood at the front. His calm presence seemed to settle the air. He was tall, steady, and carried himself with quiet authority. Behind him were cousins with names as simple as their loyalty: Tom, Joe, Ben, and David. Each of them nodded at Sam, showing respect without needing to say much. They were not here for attention. They were here because family had been hurt. Anna, resting on the couch with her arm in a cast, looked out the window and felt a wave of relief. The imposters had made her feel small and helpless, but now she saw family standing strong outside her home. She whispered to Sam that she finally felt safe again. That evening, the cousins gathered in Sam's living room. The table was filled with coffee, sandwiches, and maps of the town. Sam retold the story once more, describing the van, the false badges, and the way Anna had been pushed aside when she tried to close the door. He described the nervous glances between the imposters when he asked for proof, and how quickly they had fled after Anna was hurt. Mark listened carefully. He did not raise his voice or rush to act. Instead, he asked simple questions. What time had the van been seen? Which direction had it gone? Did anyone else in the neighborhood notice them? Sam answered as best he could, and soon the cousins began piecing the details together. Joe, who had a sharp eye for vehicles, said he recognized the type of van Sam described. It was common among small work crews, but he explained that most honest crews had clear markings or company names on the side. A plain, unmarked black van was unusual. Ben pointed out that if the imposters had been bold enough to come once, they would likely come again. The cousins agreed they needed to act quickly. Mark reminded them all that the imposters were not just tricking families for money, they had also caused harm. Anna's broken arm was proof of that. Protecting the neighborhood meant more than chasing the van away. It meant showing the imposters that their lies had no place there. As night fell, the cousins spread out in pairs, walking the quiet streets and watching carefully. They kept their distance from houses so as not to alarm the neighbors. They spoke quietly with a few families, asking if anyone else had been approached. An elderly couple shared that two men had come to their door earlier that week with the same story about rules and fines. They had refused to pay, but the encounter had left them shaken. Another family said they had nearly handed over money before deciding something did not feel right. Each story added to the cousins' determination. The imposters were not only bold but also growing bolder with every visit. If they were not stopped, they would continue to prey on kind, trusting people. Back at Sam's house, Mark laid out the plan. They would not chase trouble recklessly. Instead, they would watch carefully, follow the imposters when they returned, and confront them away from the homes of innocent neighbors. It was important to protect the families without creating more fear. The cousins all agreed. Their strength was not just in numbers, but in their patience and unity. The following afternoon, the black van returned. It rolled slowly through the neighborhood, just as Sam's neighbor had described earlier. The men inside looked around with watchful eyes, scanning houses as if deciding which door to knock on next. They stopped at the corner where the elderly couple lived. Before anyone inside could answer the knock, the cousins were already moving. Tom and Joe followed the van at a distance while Ben and David stayed near Sam's house to keep watch over Anna. Mark positioned himself at the edge of the street, his eyes never leaving the van. Sam stood beside him, his heart beating quickly. Though he was not a biker, he felt the same determination as his cousins. He could not let these imposters frighten his wife or his neighbors any longer. The van lingered for several minutes, then drove off slowly toward an old road that led to a half-abandoned industrial lot. This time, the cousins did not let it disappear. They followed in pairs, their bikes keeping a careful distance. Sam rode with Mark in a small truck, his hands tight on the steering wheel. As they drew closer to the lot, they saw the van pull over. The imposters stepped out, laughing and carrying clipboards. They looked relaxed, as if planning their next round of lies. The cousins parked quietly nearby, their presence unnoticed at first. Mark motioned for everyone to wait. He wanted the imposters to see them clearly, to understand they were not facing a frightened family this time. When the moment felt right, the cousins stepped forward as one. Their shadows stretched long across the ground in the fading light. The imposters turned and froze. Their laughter faded when they realized they were surrounded. Mark spoke first. His voice was calm, but it carried strength. He told them he knew who they were and what they had been doing. He said families in the neighborhood had been tricked, frightened, and harmed. He warned them that their games were over. The imposters exchanged nervous glances. Their confident act from the night before was gone. One of them tried to mutter something about rules and associations, but the words sounded weak even to their own ears. Mark shook his head and told them plainly that there was no association in that neighborhood and that their lies would no longer be believed. The cousins stood firm, not raising their voices, not moving an inch. Their presence alone was enough to show the imposters that the neighborhood was no longer unprotected. After a long silence, the imposters climbed back into their van. Their voices were low, their shoulders slumped. They drove off without another word. The cousins did not chase them. They did not need to. The message had been clear. That night, back at Sam's house, Anna listened as Sam retold what had happened at the lot. She smiled softly, her face filled with relief. For the first time since her fall, she felt the shadow of fear begin to lift. The cousins had shown that family stood together, and that unity could chase away even the boldest of lies. As the cousins sat around the table once more, Mark reminded everyone that the work was not yet finished. The imposters might be gone for now, but the neighborhood needed to remain watchful. Together, they agreed to spend a few more days nearby, just in case the van returned. For Sam, it was more than comfort. It was a reminder that when trouble came to the doorstep, family could rise like a storm and drive it away. The next 2 days passed with quiet tension. The cousins stayed close, watching the streets and listening to the neighbors. No one saw the black van, yet everyone knew it might return at any moment. The children played outside again, but parents kept glancing toward the road, wary of strangers. Sam and Anna tried to keep life normal, but the uneasiness never fully left. Mark and the cousins met each evening in Sam's living room. They spoke calmly but firmly about what needed to be done. Mark explained that standing watch was not enough. The imposters had been warned, but warnings alone might not stop them. If they thought the neighborhood would grow quiet and forget, they could come back stronger. What was needed now was a final confrontation that left no doubt in their minds. On the third evening, just as the cousins were finishing dinner, Tom came rushing in with news. He had spotted the black van near the old industrial road again. This time, it was parked by a half-collapsed warehouse at the edge of town. The imposters seemed to be unloading bags and talking with two other men. The room grew still. Sam felt his chest tighten. He knew this was the moment they had been waiting for. Anna looked at him with both worry and faith. She whispered that he should be careful, but she also reminded him that truth was always stronger than lies. Mark rose from his chair. His steady voice carried across the room. He said they would go together, not with anger but with unity. Their goal was not to fight but to show the imposters that the community stood strong and would not bend to false authority. Every cousin nodded. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the cousins rode out once more. Their motorcycles formed a line, headlights cutting through the growing darkness. Sam drove behind them in his truck, his hands gripping the wheel tightly. His heart beat fast, but this time fear was not the only feeling. Determination burned just as strong. They reached the warehouse soon after nightfall. The building stood silent and broken, its windows cracked, its walls stained by years of neglect. In the dim light, the black van was clearly visible. The imposters were gathered near the open doors, their voices carrying across the lot. They were laughing again, tossing their clipboards onto the hood of the van as if mocking the families they had tricked. Mark signaled the cousins, and they spread out slowly, forming a wide circle around the imposters. Their footsteps echoed softly against the cracked pavement. The laughter faded when the men realized they were no longer alone. The leader of the imposters, tall, with sharp eyes, stepped forward and tried to hold his ground. He asked who they were and why they were there. His voice carried a hint of false confidence, but his hands fidgeted nervously. Mark stepped into the light. His voice was calm but unshakable. He told the imposters that the game was over. The families of the neighborhood would no longer believe their lies, and no amount of fake badges or false rules would give them power. He reminded them that they had already harmed one woman and frightened many more, and that such behavior would not be tolerated again. The imposters shifted uncomfortably. One of them tried to claim they were part of an official organization, but his words stumbled. Another muttered something about community order, but even he did not sound convinced. The cousins stood silent behind Mark, their presence strong and steady. Sam stepped forward then, his heart pounding but his voice clear. He told the imposters how his wife Anna had been hurt because of their actions. He described the fear they had caused to the elderly couple down the street, and how they had nearly tricked families into handing over money. His words carried the weight of truth, and for the first time the imposters lowered their eyes. The night air was heavy with silence. The cousins did not move. They did not raise their hands or their voices. They simply stood united, a wall of family loyalty that could not be broken. Finally, Mark spoke again. He told the imposters they had two choices. They could leave the town and never return, or they could face the truth in front of every family they had tried to deceive. His voice held no anger, only certainty. It was the voice of someone who knew right from wrong and would not bend. The imposters looked at each other nervously. Their confidence had drained away completely. They realized that their tricks no longer worked here. Without another word, they began gathering their things. Clipboards, bags, and badges were shoved back into the van. Their movements were hurried, their eyes darting nervously toward the cousins who stood like a silent shield. Sam watched as the van's engine started and the headlights lit up the broken warehouse walls. Slowly, the vehicle pulled away, its tires crunching against the gravel. No one tried to stop them. There was no need. The imposters had seen enough to know they would not win against unity and truth. When the sound of the van finally faded into the distance, a wave of calm washed over the group. Sam exhaled deeply, his hands trembling with release. He turned to Mark and whispered a thank you, his voice thick with emotion. Mark placed a steady hand on his shoulder. He told Sam this was not just about family, but about community. A strong community stood together, and that was what made it safe. He reminded everyone that their presence had not been about anger but about protecting the ones they loved. Back at the house, Anna listened to the story with tears in her eyes. She held Sam's hand and told him she was proud. She knew the imposters would not return, not after facing such unity. That night, as the cousins sat around the table once more, laughter returned for the first time in days. It was soft at first, but soon it filled the room with warmth. The fear that had hung over the neighborhood was gone, replaced by the strength of family and the calm of justice done without a single hand raised. Sam looked at Anna, then at Mark and the cousins. He realized something deep and true. Life could change in an instant, but family and loyalty had the power to turn fear into strength. He would never forget this lesson. The night after the confrontation felt different in the neighborhood. For the first time in weeks, families opened their curtains without fear. Children played on front porches again, and neighbors greeted one another with brighter smiles. The shadow that had hung over the street had finally lifted. Sam stood at his porch, watching the quiet scene. The crickets chirped in the grass, and a soft breeze stirred the leaves of the trees. For days he had lived with worry pressing on his chest, but now that weight was gone. Anna sat nearby in her chair, her arm still in a cast but her face calm. She looked at him with gentle eyes, and Sam knew she felt the same peace. The cousins were still there. Their motorcycles lined the curb like silent guardians. Though they had no need to stay much longer, Mark had decided they would remain a few more days. He wanted to make sure the imposters truly stayed away. His presence gave the whole neighborhood a sense of security. That morning, neighbors began to gather around Sam's yard. First came Tom, carrying his newspaper under his arm. Then came the elderly couple who had been frightened by the imposters. Soon, almost a dozen people stood together, some holding small plates of food, others simply offering words of thanks. They wanted to meet the cousins, to thank them for bringing peace back to their street. Mark, though not a man who sought attention, greeted them politely. He told them he and his cousins had only done what was right. He reminded the neighbors that strength did not come from badges or loud voices but from people standing together. The neighbors nodded, feeling the truth in his words. Anna, still seated, spoke to the group. She told them how afraid she had been and how quickly that fear disappeared when she saw family arrive. Her voice trembled with emotion, but she smiled as she spoke. She said the imposters had tried to break her spirit, but the love around her had given her strength. The neighbors listened quietly, some wiping tears from their eyes. That evening, the cousins held one final gathering at Sam's house. The table was filled with food brought by grateful neighbors. Children laughed in the yard while adults shared stories on the porch. The once quiet street was alive with warmth and community. For years, the neighbors had lived side by side but rarely shared more than small greetings. Now, after facing a common danger, they felt closer than ever before. Sam watched the scene with deep gratitude. He realized something important. The imposters had tried to divide and frighten people, but instead, their tricks had brought the community closer. Unity had grown from hardship, and that bond would not be easily broken. Later in the night, when the laughter had quieted and the stars filled the sky, Sam and Mark sat together on the porch steps. The air was cool, and the distant sound of a dog barking echoed across the fields. For a while, they said nothing, content to sit in the calm silence. At last, Sam spoke. He told Mark how thankful he was, not only for the protection but for the lesson. He said he had always lived quietly, never seeking trouble, but now he understood that sometimes life demanded courage. Courage did not always mean standing alone. Sometimes it meant calling on family and facing hardship together. Mark listened, then placed a hand on Sam's shoulder. He told him that family was not just about blood but about loyalty, trust, and standing firm when storms came. He said Sam had shown courage by refusing to bow to lies and by protecting Anna when she needed him most. The next morning, the cousins prepared to leave. Their motorcycles shone in the sunlight, polished and ready for the long road ahead. Neighbors gathered again to wave goodbye, thanking them once more for their help. Children clapped and cheered as the engines rumbled to life. Before climbing onto his bike, Mark turned to Sam. He pulled him into a firm embrace, the kind only family could share. He told him to stay strong and to remember that even when the cousins were miles away, he was never alone. Family was always only a call away. Anna stepped forward and smiled warmly at Mark. She thanked him for standing by them and told him he would always have a place in their home. Mark nodded, his eyes softening for a moment before he put on his helmet. The roar of the engines filled the air as the cousins rode away in a single line, their figures shrinking into the horizon. The neighborhood watched until they were gone, then slowly returned to their homes. For Sam and Anna, life slowly returned to normal. The days passed with quiet routines, watering the garden, sitting on the porch, sharing meals with neighbors. Yet something had changed inside them. They no longer saw their house as just a place of shelter. It had become a symbol of endurance and love, a place where family had stood strong together. Weeks later, when Anna's cast was removed, she and Sam celebrated with a simple dinner. They laughed more freely, their smiles brighter. Though the memory of the imposters still lingered, it no longer carried fear. Instead, it reminded them of how courage and unity could overcome deception. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with shades of orange and pink, Sam walked through the neighborhood. He saw Tom chatting with the elderly couple on their porch. Children were riding bicycles in circles, their laughter echoing down the street. For the first time, Sam noticed how connected everyone had become. The imposters had failed to break them, instead, they had sparked a bond of trust among neighbors who had once been strangers. When Sam returned home, Anna was waiting on the porch. She asked him what he was thinking about. He smiled and told her that even though trouble had knocked on their door, it had given them something greater in return. It had shown them the power of standing together. That night, as they sat side by side under the stars, Sam felt a peace deeper than he had ever known. Life was not always safe or simple, but with Anna by his side and family within reach, he knew they could face whatever came. The memory of the imposters would fade, but the lesson of loyalty and unity would remain forever. And so the quiet neighborhood found a new strength. Not from fear, not from false authority, but from the truth that family and community were stronger than any storm.